All men dream, but not equally. Those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dreams with open eyes to make it possible. Lawrence of Arabia wasn't just an epic war film. It was a production so brutal, so ambitious, and so wildly over budget that it nearly destroyed everyone involved. Director David Lean spent 3 years turning the desert into his personal vision of hell. Stars collapsed from heat exhaustion, budgets exploded, entire sequences vanished forever, and through it all, one virtually unknown actor from Ireland emerged as cinema's most unlikely legend. Behind the sweeping desert vistas and soaring musical score lies a story of near madness, studio warfare, and the kind of filmmaking that simply doesn't exist anymore. Today we're revealing 20 weird facts about Lawrence of Arabia that will change how you see this masterpiece forever. Plus, there's a bonus fact at the end that involves a missing scene so controversial it was locked away for decades. Hit that subscribe button because things are about to get wild. Albert Finney was actually cast first and fired after 2 days. Albert Finney was a virtual unknown at the time, but he was Lean's first choice to play Lawrence. What most people don't know is that Finney didn't just turn down the role, he was actually cast and began filming. Finney was cast and began principal photography, but was fired after 2 days for reasons unclear. The official story claims Finney walked away because he refused to sign a 7-year contract with producer Sam Spiegel. But crew members whispered about violent arguments between Finney and Lean over the character's interpretation. Finney reportedly called Lawrence a perverted exhibitionist during one heated exchange. Within 48 hours, he was gone, leaving behind only a few unusable takes and a production in complete chaos. Peter O'Toole was so unknown he had to audition against his own screen test. When Peter O'Toole finally got the role, he was so obscure that Columbia Pictures executives couldn't remember his name. "I can't imagine anyone whom I'm less like than T.E. Lawrence," O'Toole admitted, but he suspects director David Lean wanted someone who could act it rather than be it. The studio was so nervous about casting an unknown that they made O'Toole audition multiple times, including once against his own previous screen test, to see if he was consistent. Studio head Harry Cohn famously asked, "Who the hell is Peter O'Toole?" mispronouncing his name. O'Toole's response was reportedly unprintable, yet this unknown actor was about to deliver what many consider the greatest debut performance in cinema history. The film's budget exploded from $3 million to $15 million. Some $15 million, around 3 years in time, much hardship and incredible logistics have been poured into this king-size adventure yarn, but that astronomical figure started as a modest $3 million budget. David Lean's perfectionism turned every scene into an ordeal. He once spent an entire day repositioning a single camel for the perfect silhouette. When executives questioned the expenses, Lean reportedly told them, "You want cheap? Make a Western." Sam Spiegel read Bolt's assessment in the morning papers and was not amused. He had also been checking on the film's expenses. The budget spiraled so wildly out of control that Columbia nearly pulled the plug 3 times. Only the studio's fear of losing their already massive investment kept the cameras rolling. Marlon Brando was offered the lead, and his response was legendary. Marlon Brando was also offered the part, while Anthony Perkins and Montgomery Clift were briefly considered before O'Toole was cast. When Spiegel approached Brando with the script, the method acting legend read it overnight and called the next morning with his response, "Sam, darling, I'd rather spend 2 years in a real desert than pretend in yours." Brando's rejection wasn't just about the harsh shooting conditions. He'd reportedly heard horror stories about Lean's directing style from Alec Guinness, who'd suffered through Bridge on the River Kwai. Brando's agent later revealed that the star was also concerned about spending months isolated from his Tahitian island retreat. The role that made O'Toole a legend was Hollywood's most expensive rejection letter. The opening motorcycle crash was filmed at a real accident site. The iconic opening sequence where Lawrence dies in a motorcycle accident wasn't filmed on a studio lot. Lean insisted on authenticity and found the actual curve of road near Lawrence's cottage where the real crash occurred in 1935. Local residents were disturbed by the recreation, especially since some had witnessed the original accident. The stuntman performing the crash, Alf Joint, broke his collarbone during the first take, but insisted on continuing. Lean shot 17 different angles of the crash over 3 days, turning the quiet countryside into a film set filled with screaming metal and shattered glass. Villagers later complained that they couldn't drive past the location without remembering both crashes superimposed on each other. José Ferrer nearly declined his role because it was too small. Ironically, Ferrer nearly declined the role he played because it was so small, roughly 5 minutes out of a 4-hour movie. The distinguished actor felt the part of the Turkish Bey was beneath him until he read the torture scene. Ferrer realized this brief appearance would be one of cinema's most psychologically complex villain roles. Said that he learned more about acting by working with José Ferrer in Lawrence of Arabia, 1962, than in any acting class. Ferrer himself considers that role to be his best. The torture sequence was so intense that Ferrer and O'Toole had to take breaks between takes. Ferrer later admitted the role haunted him for years, calling it 5 minutes of perfect evil that took months to wash off my soul. David Lean spent an entire week filming Clouds. David Lean's pursuit of perfection on Lawrence of Arabia often crossed into obsession. One infamous incident saw production grind to a halt for 7 full days while he waited, not for an actor or a set piece, but for the perfect cloud formation. Under the scorching 130-degree desert sun, the crew idled while Lean studied the sky with filters and lenses, searching for a fleeting alignment no one else could see. Tempers flared, equipment baked in the heat, and thousands of dollars evaporated daily. But Lean refused to compromise. When the clouds finally gathered, he rolled cameras for 18 minutes straight, capturing formations so striking that he repurposed them across multiple scenes. The indulgence came at staggering cost, nearly $200,000, more than many entire films of the era. Crew members, half in awe and half exasperated, later joked that Lean would have delayed production another week if he could have figured out how to direct a single grain of sand. To Lean, it wasn't waste, it was art. That obsessive eye helped elevate Lawrence of Arabia into legend, but it also pushed cast, crew, and budget to the very edge of endurance. Anthony Quinn refused to ride camels and demanded a body double. Quinn, playing Auda Abutai, was terrified of the camels and refused to mount one after the first day of filming. His reasoning? The camels were impossible, according to O'Toole's own memories. But Quinn's fear went deeper. He'd been thrown and trampled by a horse during a previous Western and developed a phobia of large animals. Every wide shot of Quinn on camelback actually features his stunt double, with Quinn's face later added through careful editing, and close-ups shot against blue screens. The deception was so convincing that Quinn received praise for his fearless desert riding. Only the stunt crew knew that Hollywood's most macho actor spent most of his desert scenes standing safely on wooden platforms. The desert scenes were shot in 3 different countries because of political chaos. The movie, shot on location in Jordan, Spain, and Morocco, is famed for its ravishing desert vistas. But this wasn't an artistic choice. It was pure survival. The production started in Jordan with the blessing of King Hussein, but political tensions forced them to flee to Spain's Almeria Desert after 6 months. When Spanish authorities grew suspicious of the large British crew during Franco's regime, they relocated again to Morocco. Each move cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and required rebuilding sets, rehiring local crews, and retraining camels. Lean later admitted that the film's sweeping desert scope came from necessity. We didn't choose 3 deserts for visual variety. 3 deserts chose us when we wore out our welcome everywhere we went. The famous Mirage scene used a trick that nearly killed a stuntman. The legendary scene where Sheriff Ali emerges from a desert mirage used a camera technique that was revolutionary and nearly fatal. Lean positioned the camera at ground level with telephoto lenses to create the shimmering heat effect, but the stuntman riding toward the camera couldn't see where he was going through the heat distortion and mirage effects. During the fifth take, his camel veered directly toward the camera crew. The stuntman pulled up just feet from the lens, but the camel collapsed from heat exhaustion. The animal survived, but the incident forced Lean to use forced perspective and optical effects for the remaining mirage shots. That famous shimmering approach that made Omar Sharif a star was literally a life-or-death gamble caught on film. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, because we're about to dive into the facts that the studio tried to keep buried, including what really happened during those missing 20 minutes of footage. 20 minutes of the original film were cut and never seen again. Shortly after premiere, which took place in London in December 1962, David Lean, reportedly under the orders of producer Sam Spiegel, cut 20 minutes from the film to 202 minutes. But here's what they don't tell you. Those 20 minutes weren't just trimmed for pacing. They contained Lawrence's most psychologically disturbing scenes, including extended torture sequences and implications about his relationship with the Arab boys. Lean fought the cuts violently, reportedly throwing furniture in Spiegel's office and threatening to have his name removed from the film. The deleted scenes were supposedly destroyed, but rumors persist that a single print exists in Spiegel's estate. These lost 20 minutes might contain the most psychologically complex character development ever filmed, and subsequently buried by a nervous studio. Claude Rains was drunk for most of his scenes. The distinguished British actor playing Mr. Dryden arrived on set with a reputation for professionalism, but left with whispers of chaos. Rains was reportedly drinking heavily to cope with the desert heat and his deteriorating eyesight. His condition was so bad that his dialogue had to be written on massive cue cards placed just outside camera range. Other actors learned to deliver their lines slowly because Rains needed extra time to read his responses. Yet somehow, his impaired performance created a character of weary cynicism that perfectly captured British imperial decline. Lean later admitted that Rains' condition actually improved his performance. Alcohol gave him a truth about empire that sobriety might have made too obvious. The real Lawrence's family tried to stop the film. T. Lawrence's surviving family members were horrified by the production and attempted legal action to prevent the film's release. His brother, Professor A.W. Lawrence, publicly denounced the script as a psychological recipe for adventure story readers and claimed it portrayed their brother as mentally unstable. The family was particularly outraged by implications about Lawrence's private life and his psychological state after the Turkish prison. Their protests grew so vocal that Columbia hired private investigators to dig up potential scandals about the Lawrence family to ensure their silence. The legal battle was settled quietly out of court, but Professor Lawrence continued attacking the film in academic circles until his death, calling it Hollywood's most expensive lie about a great man. O'Toole suffered permanent injury during the camel riding scenes. O'Toole's legendary performance came at a devastating physical cost. The constant camel riding over months of filming damaged his spine so severely that he suffered chronic back pain for the rest of his life. But the injury that nearly ended his career happened during the attack on a Kaaba sequence. His camel stumbled during a charge scene, throwing O'Toole against the pommel of his saddle with enough force to rupture internal organs. He finished the scene before collapsing, bleeding internally. The nearest hospital was 8 hours away across desert roads. O'Toole survived, but doctors warned that another similar impact could have killed him. He never rode a camel again, using doubles for all remaining mounted scenes. The performance that made him a legend nearly cost him his life. The film used real explosives that created actual combat conditions. Lean's commitment to authenticity extended to using military-grade explosives for the train attack sequences. The British Army provided actual demolition charges and combat engineers to ensure realism. During the filming of the Turkish train destruction, explosions went off prematurely, showering the cast and crew with real shrapnel and debris. 3 crew members required hospitalization for cuts and burns. O'Toole suffered temporary hearing damage that lasted for weeks. The explosions were so massive, they were felt in villages 20 miles away, prompting hundreds of panicked phone calls to authorities. Local newspapers reported that the filmmakers had created a real battle in the desert. Lean's response was typically blunt. If you want it to look like war, you have to make war. Anthony Quayle developed severe depression. During the desert shooting, Quayle, playing Colonel Brighton, began exhibiting signs of severe psychological distress after 3 months in the desert locations. The isolation, heat, and Lean's demanding perfectionism created what production notes describe as acute melancholia. Quayle began missing call times, staying in his tent for days, and refusing to speak to other cast members. A psychiatrist was flown in from London when Quayle began talking about disappearing into the desert permanently. The doctor's report, later leaked, described the production as psychologically brutal and recommended immediate evacuation for several cast members. Quayle completed his scenes but required months of therapy afterward. He later wrote that Lawrence of Arabia nearly destroyed my sanity and definitely destroyed my faith in the nobility of filmmaking. The famous No Prisoners scene was based on a real war crime. The sequence where Lawrence orders the massacre of Turkish soldiers was historically accurate and legally controversial. Lean consulted military historians who confirmed that Lawrence participated in war crimes during the Arab Revolt, including the execution of prisoners. The scene was filmed with such brutal realism that several crew members walked off the set in protest. Colombia's legal department initially demanded the sequence be cut, fearing international incidents with Turkey and other NATO allies. Only direct intervention from the British government, which wanted Lawrence portrayed as a complex rather than purely heroic figure, allowed the scene to remain. Turkish authorities banned the film for 15 years specifically because of this sequence. Lean later admitted, "We showed the real Lawrence, not the legend. That made everyone uncomfortable, including us." Maurice Jarre's iconic score was written in complete secrecy. Maurice Jarre created the legendary score for Lawrence of Arabia under conditions that bordered on espionage. The original composer, Malcolm Arnold, had been dismissed after David Lean declared his work completely wrong for the desert. Fearing further missteps and whispers that rival studios were trying to steal musical themes for competing epics, Lean placed Jarre under extraordinary security. Locked inside a London studio with armed guards posted at the doors, Jarre composed in near isolation. He wasn't given finished footage to inspire him, only Lean's vivid verbal descriptions and a handful of still photographs. From these fragments, Jarre was expected to invent the sound of the desert. Legend has it the film's unforgettable main theme came in a single sleepless night after Jarre dreamed he was lost among the dunes. When the orchestra finally performed the completed score, witnesses said grown men wept openly, overwhelmed by the music's sweeping emotion. The secrecy and strain proved worthwhile. Jarre's score didn't just elevate Lawrence of Arabia, it transcended it, becoming more famous than many films it would later accompany. Out of pressure and paranoia, Jarre forged one of cinema's most enduring soundscapes. The film's success destroyed David Lean's marriage and mental health. Director David Lean devoted nearly 3 years of his life to Lawrence of Arabia, and those years consumed everything outside cinema. During production, his wife left, taking their children and refusing contact until filming ended. Lean, obsessed with capturing perfection in every frame, paid a staggering personal price. The desert ordeal transformed him physically and mentally. He lost 40 pounds and was diagnosed with severe nervous exhaustion. His doctor urged him to stop, but Lean pressed on, driven by an almost unhealthy need for control. Crew members later recalled seeing him wandering the sets at night, speaking to the ghost of T.E. Lawrence as though he were still alive. Others swore he described shots and camera angles that didn't exist, hallucinations born from exhaustion and relentless pressure. The film's eventual triumph secured Lean's place in cinematic history, but his private world lay in ruins. He didn't speak to his children for more than a decade, the estrangement, a painful reminder of what the masterpiece had cost. Years later, Lean admitted the truth in chilling words. "I gave Lawrence my soul and got back a film. It was the worst trade I ever made. Columbia Pictures nearly sold the film to television before its premiere." Just weeks before its London premiere, Lawrence of Arabia nearly vanished from theaters forever. Columbia executives, unnerved by its sprawling 210-minute runtime and unconventional pacing, feared audiences wouldn't endure 4 hours of desert landscapes and psychological drama. Behind the backs of producer Sam Spiegel and director David Lean, they secretly negotiated with television networks to offload the film. ABC quickly offered $8 million for broadcast rights, enough for Columbia to recoup its investment without risking a theatrical flop. To the studio, turning Lawrence into a primetime miniseries seemed safer than releasing it on the big screen. The plan was so advanced that the deal stood just 48 hours from completion, but Spiegel and Lean fought back. Spiegel threatened to sue, while Lean vowed to destroy the film negative rather than see his epic reduced to television. Their defiance forced Columbia to relent. The gamble paid off. Lawrence of Arabia premiered to massive acclaim, sweeping audiences and critics alike, and winning 5 BAFTAs alongside global box office success. In a final twist of irony, the executive who pushed hardest for the television sale was quietly reassigned, fittingly, to Columbia's TV division. Here's the secret that even film historians don't know. Peter O'Toole's legendary piercing blue eyes were actually toned down using early optical effects. His natural eye color was so startlingly intense that it created technical problems with the film stock and lighting. In close-up shots, his eyes reflected light so brilliantly that they appeared almost white on camera, creating an otherworldly effect that Lean felt was too distracting from Lawrence's humanity. The solution required a groundbreaking optical technique where O'Toole's eyes were selectively color-corrected in post-production, making them appear slightly less vivid. This process was so experimental and expensive that it was only used for key dramatic scenes. Ironically, the eyes that made O'Toole famous for their mesmerizing intensity were actually artificially dulled. The real O'Toole's eyes were so striking they had to be diminished to seem believable as human. Lawrence of Arabia remains the last great epic made when filmmakers were willing to risk everything for their vision. It destroyed careers, marriages, and budgets. It pushed actors to their physical and psychological limits. It created techniques that wouldn't be seen again for decades. But from that chaos emerged a film so magnificent, so psychologically complex, and so visually stunning that it redefined what cinema could accomplish. Every superhero blockbuster, every CGI spectacle, every modern epic stands in the shadow of what David Lean and his cast accomplished in the desert with nothing but film, flesh, and an uncompromising vision of human complexity. What did you think of these behind-the-scenes revelations? Drop a comment below with your favorite Lawrence of Arabia moment, and don't forget to subscribe for more buried Hollywood secrets. Remember, in the desert, nothing is as it seems, including the movies made there.